Okay, this is Big Tugg. This video is about a deep dive. It's a deep dive into Adult Swim. Did you guys ever watch Adult Swim growing up? Like, I was never allowed. I was never allowed as a kid. It was prohibited that I watch it. I was not allowed. I saw like tidbits of it when other people would watch it. Like I think my parents watched one of the shows on there. And I was like, why does everyone like this? Like the animation is bad. This is like what I watch, but worse. I couldn't believe this aired on a children TV show when I discovered it. Yeah, it's like adult, it's like children after dark, but it's like that doesn't happen. So it's like children's show during the day, random adult show police at night, which is kind of odd. It's just an interesting, weird premise. So let's hear about it.
There are truly only a few constants in the human experience. We all die, we all poop, and we all got scared shitless as a child because we left the TV on Cartoon Network a little bit too long, and at 10 p.m. that weird guy from Robot Chicken got on the screen and it was terrifying. Why was he so scary?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, what is that? I was like, man, I don't know what my parents are watching. This is weird.
Swim. Love it or hate it, it has had a massive impact on American culture for the past 21 years. That's right, 21 years. This sin fest of adult animation has been rocking its way on a children's entertainment network for as long as a human being has to live to drink. But when Adult Swim debuted, adult animation wasn't like a new idea. In 1972, the X-rated film Fritz the Cats made like $90 million.
Wow, what the? That looks so weird. Was it like, why did they go with the cat? Like, it almost looks like they were like, oh, Tom and Jerry's popular. So what if there was an adult, you know, Tom and Jerry?
Worldwide. You had The Simpsons, which first aired in 1989, and I think it's still going. I haven't checked in a little bit. And in 2005, South Park won the Peabody Award, which is insane, but it's proof that, you know, this wasn't new. But what sets apart Adult Swim from other channels? Well, I guess not channel. It's a programming block. But what sets it apart isn't its notable longevity or its, you know, tendency to shock audiences. It was its ability to create its own space to showcase alternative voices and ideas under one roof. Its ability to bring outsider art to the mainstream, and its ability to, for some reason, not worry about making any money while doing the first two things. Well,
he's not wrong, okay? He's not wrong. Well, like I said, because my parents would sometimes watch stuff on there, I would like walk by and see a commercial or whatever, and I was like, what the heck is this even? And then when I got older and I went and looked at went and just watched some of the stuff, I was like, some of this stuff, it's just impressive it got this far.
Welcome to Adult Swim, one of the most important cultural touchstones of American modern television.
The history.
So before we dive into Adult Swim, and yeah, there's gonna be a lot of swimming puns in this one, we need to take a little trip into an insane world known as the 1990s. Some of you kiddos have only been alive for years that start with a 2 and a 0, so let me tell you about the 90s as an expert on the decade.
He wasn't fully conscious yet.
Phone booths littered street corners, which is crazy because not only were you making literal phone calls in public in boxes, but you also had to have quarters on you all the time, which is weird to me. Pizza Hut was a sit-down restaurant, and they also had these really cool lamps that I cannot find for the...
I think this is crazy. It's more surprising that people would want to go to a place like this to sit down and eat than the fact that it existed. The fact that it was successful for a long enough period of time before they got rid of it is what's weird.
Life of me, I want one so goddamn bad. Games like Doom and Quake were giving sexless men with no aspiration in life something to do while they whittled away. And cable TV had grown from a novelty to a necessity. Originally, cable TV was something for rich people to have to flex on the poors who were still using rabbit ears to get channels. But then in the 90s, cable TV became a giant industry generating over $1 billion in ad revenue.
Oh my God. I mean, I knew TV was big, but that's insane. Just thinking about how, like, it's uncommon now for people to have, you know, cable TV. But back then, it was like, it was booming. Like, it made so much money.
New every year. And this bizarre backdrop of prosperity and ugly culture was the perfect pressure cooker for the insanity of Adult Swim. I had to read that one off the phone because that was a really hard full sentence to say and memorize.
I was gonna say, that sounded like a tongue twister, man.
Early 90s, cartoons were a far cry from what we know them as today. Instead of, you know, original shows that people know and love, it was really just mainly Hanna-Barbera reruns for the most part. You know, Hanna-Barbera, the studio that was founded by the Tom and Jerry crew.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know who that was. All right. But I do know what a Tom and Jerry is, okay? So I'm doing well there.
In the early 50s, and then they made a bunch of terribly animated shows like the Jetsons, Yogi Bear, Flintstones, like all those things. Fun fact, almost every Hanna-Barbera character has a collar or something around their neck in their character design because
What?
it made it easier to animate their faces by just swapping out their heads completely.
Oh my god, what? Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the video, but now you'll never be able to unsee it. But the rise of syndicated cable made it so Sunday cartoons were becoming less and less popular over time. The kids are drinking Surge soda and eating Future ice cream. They don't got time for no goddamn wacky races. This allowed the back catalog of Hanna-Barbera cartoons to
I mean, Dippin' Dots were good. They still are, man. I love me some Dippin' Dots.
drop in price so TBS could sweep them up, and then that eventually led to the creation of Cartoon Network in 1992. And it did pretty well. I mean, there was not a lot of places on cable TV for kids to go and watch shit, so it was filling a vacuum. However, it had one large problem that other channels did not have to deal with, and this problem is, of course, the fact that, let me see here, children are dorks who go to bed early.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not really dorks. It's well, yeah, we probably are. Well, I was one. But like also their parents wouldn't let them stay up to watch stuff that late, you know?
Pretty consistent problem across the board for TV people. So advertisers don't want to buy ad space at like 10 p.m. on Cartoon Network because literally nobody was watching that. And when you
That makes sense though, but then they're tapping in, right? They're like, this is an untapped market, which means that like there is room for somebody to do that and go uncontested at the moment, right?
You consider what other people were doing for late night TV in the 90s, you can see the advertiser's point. TV after 10 o'clock was hyper focused on adults. Still kind of is, honestly. Major networks aired like talk shows and infomercials. And
I still think this is probably the case. I don't watch TV anymore, but last I watched TV, I feel like this was still the case. Like all the talk shows and stuff, I thought they were at like 9 or 10 p.m.
cable networks would play like
Usually.
risky movies or ads for phone sex, which was a big thing in the 90s. Phone
What?
sex, which is crazy to me. I don't.
Oh man, I kind of remember that vaguely. They had to do it in like a very commercial friendly way, and it made it hilarious because it's like, bro, we all know what you're saying. We all know what you're trying to advertise right now.
I don't think I would ever see the appeal of that. I'm just happy how far we've come in the porn industry. This is actually a fun fact. The USA Network was wiling out with a program called USA Up All Night. It was hosted by Gilbert Gottfried, and it would just play heavily edited B-list porn exploitation movies.
Oh my gosh.
All the time. Like one of them was Nymphoid Barbarian and
Oh my gosh, look at this one.
Dinosaur Hell. I'd watch that. I'd watch that right now. Even children's cable programming pioneer Nickelodeon would change their whole thing and do Nick at Night, which would be like, you know, sitcoms from times earlier. So they would get the adult appeal without being, you know, degenerates. Something that you will learn Adult Swim did not take. But
Oh yeah, I was gonna say the crazy thing is that there was like different channels that had nighttime shows that were for adults on kid shows like Nick at Night, but Adult Swim was like they just went. They went so far with that.
And neglecting to mention one important tidbit that even the Cartoon Network executives weren't counting on. A third of Cartoon Network's watchers were adults. Weird adults, but adults nonetheless. So you got a time slot where people aren't watching, you got some weird adults that might be floating around. What do? Well, you make a cartoon show for weird adults. And
I would argue it's not even weird adults, all right? I would argue it is like teenagers that think this is what being an adult means, right? Because like a lot of those channels that like went really overboard with like tons of swearing and like offensive humor, it was like they were trying to capitalize on the fact that like kids felt really rebellious for watching stuff like that, right?
1994, Cartoon Network made
That's
a
just
show
my
called
opinion.
Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And if you don't know what this is, get excited. There was an old Hanna-Barbera cartoon called Space Ghost that like literally everyone forgot about. And what they did was they take
what
clips
is
from that
that?
show and they would cut them up and edit them and voice them over to make a completely new show.
Oh my God.
Literally, Cartoon Network did not have any money for original programming, so they had to
Wow.
cut corners every chance they got. The original show.
So they were just making their own original dubs off of like old cartoons and like
I own a box
sticking
of
them together.
unopened VHS copies of A Nymphoid Barbarian Hell. I have been giving them away as gag gifts for years.
Oh my gosh, really? That's crazy. That's great. What the heck? So we got some enjoyers of this, okay? This was good, apparently. I never watched it, but
was about a
based.
space superhero that fought dinosaurs, which is the most 60s fever dream coke bender idea I've ever heard. So then they took that character and put it in a talk show setting which
Wow.
just by the premise alone is hilarious, I think. And since Cartoon Network did not have an original content budget, they had to funnel advertising budget into the show itself. Like, they couldn't advertise Cartoon Network on other channels. They just had to put that money into Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And personally, I think it was worth it, and historically it turned out to be, but a lot of people were against the show originally. It was way before its time, with extremely well-written jokes and absurdist humor, and it also got a bunch of real-life celebrities to go on the show in a weird meta talk show kind of thing. I mean, to get the vibe of the show, all you have to do is see the time Conan O'Brien went on, and instead of Space Ghost interviewing him, Space Ghost just like investigated an ant for 10 minutes straight while Conan just dealt with no one talking to him.
I think this show is very bad.
Okay.
And should be stopped.
Oh, okay.
I think you're a bad person, and don't take this the wrong way.
Oh my god.
Just next level stuff.
I was gonna say that for that time, that's like really clever. It sounds like I don't know, a very clever idea. But what stinks is it might have been like ahead of its time. Like if it came out a little later, like there might have been people who like enjoyed it for like better.
Just really next level shit. The show quickly gained a cult following, and it was showing some promise. So the executives were like, okay, what else can we do? This is kind of working. And they were like,
yeah, because I feel like, you know, like the silly cursed dubs that now exist for animes do like pretty much the same thing, but they don't do the whole like cut out pieces of it and put it into full on bits like for a different plot, sort of. They normally just take the original anime and dub over it differently than the original story. So this was like that, but even more clever. Like they built on that even further.
I don't know, let's try anime? Anime might work. In the 90s, a lot of people, no one cared about anime in the 90s, really, at all. Some people did, but they were this. So the mainstream appeal of anime was not there at all. So licensing was cheap. So they were like, screw it, throw it up there. And suddenly this became a staple of the channel too during the nighttime segment, which led to the 1997 block Toonami, which you should know about. It's iconic. And it showed a lot of kids who had never had experience watching anime before, things like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon and Gundam Wing, all these shows that everyone loves now. So the executives all get together and talk to Mike Lazo, the creator of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and they say, hey, listen, we're starting to fuck with the vision a little bit, okay? We think we can turn this garbage time slot into something hot and bothered with the right direction. And Mike was like,
oh boy, they're cooking.
Let me hop in the kitchen. Let me see what I can cook up real quick. Of course, the ad sales team at Cartoon Network was resistant to it because they were like, you know, this is a cartoon children's network.
Yeah, they're probably like, how could we do this? How could we invest in this and have it actually make money? Just how YouTube is, man. It's like, how could I do this without it just being a complete sink of, you know, profits? Because if we do something adult, then nobody's gonna want to hold advertising slots.
Selling really adult shows. How are we supposed to pitch this?
Yeah.
And they had a good point, but Lazo, I don't know which one it is, but he had a year to pull this off. So, you know, who's to say he's even gonna get it done? Who knows if he can pull this off? A small group
pulled it off, let's go.
Started working around the clock for a thing that would eventually become Adult Swim. None of them, mind you, with a history of animation in their background.
Oh.
None of them had that. What they did have was...
I did not realize none of them had any history of animation.
The shared vision of weird shit and the ability to work really hard for long hours. A lot of them had full-time jobs at a Cartoon Network, and they also had another full-time job.
Fun fact, you can find full Toonami blocks with commercials on YouTube.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's cool though.
Which was creating Adult Swim. And there was no like offices for the Adult Swim team, so they had to do whatever they could, wherever they could. They were editing footage in broom closets and using old PCs that no one else was using because that's all they had at the time. And also,
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure, literally. That thrown away computer was being used like to innovate the space in cartoons.
Even though Cartoon Network gave Adult Swim the green light, no one at the company was really happy about it. Shows like Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, and C-Lab 2021, which were also two Hanna-Barbera shows that, like, you know, no one was thinking about anymore, so they gave it the old Space Ghost treatment and just kind of changed things about it and remixed it. Well, these remixes actually ended up upsetting the original creators of the show.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I kind of wondered about that, because it's like two things, right? They're recreating content that did not pop off in the first place, right? And so like maybe the originals will get more popularity, but at the same time, you know, whatever message they originally had is completely gone because they've made it into a meme and they've completely cut it up into bits and it doesn't even hold the same like idea it had before.
They didn't say you could do that. And the original
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was like being abridged, except for it was even more, it went further than abridged because they added stuff onto it.
shows were like fun kids cartoons, and these were not at all.
Try to get word to my mother.
Oh yeah, because also I didn't even think about that. These originally were broadcast to kids, and now like the way they were doing this was actually making them not kid friendly also.
Your mother.
Alex Toth, the original creator of Birdman and Sea Labs, was like, yo, stop. Please stop. Which I understand, but how can you watch this clip from Sea Lab and tell me it's not worth it?
Dude, check me out. I'm like a little otter. A sexy little otter.
Oh my
I
god.
quote this daily. No one knows what I'm talking about, but I am a sexy little otter. And it's not just the creators. People inside the company were confused as hell as to what is going on. Executives still fully didn't understand what the appeal or even the base humor of these shows actually were. The ad teams still didn't know how to pitch these shows to advertisers because I personally wouldn't know how to do that. And once
Yeah, because again, they were ahead of their time, and there wasn't like this stupid memeing. I mean, I'm sure they had stupid memes, but I feel like this probably popularized them more than they ever were. I could see how this being so popular, all of a sudden people are like, I don't get it. What is this even?
Again, people were editing footage in closets, so, you know, the work-to-life balance was not great. But despite the crazy working conditions and initial confusion, the trials and tribulations were over, and Adult Swim finally debuted on September 2nd, 2001.
Wow.
Well, there's more trials and tribulations coming up, but they were out of Adult Swim's control. They couldn't really do anything about it.
Oh boy. Okay.
So the red carpet wasn't exactly laid out for Adult Swim's premiere, which makes sense because it aired at midnight, and people don't really care about new programming blocks. Like, looking back on it, yeah, it's Adult Swim, it's a big deal, but like, CBS is like, we're running new, who gives a fuck? No one's tuning in for that. But it was a weird start, like it was a slow roll. Like it wasn't a, hey, here's Adult Swim completely finished, enjoy it, we're done making it. It was a slow rollout. It was testing the waters of the late night audiences.
Yeah, so the other curious thing, right, is like having an announcement about the premiere of the first episode of anything back then. Cartoons were not as mainstream. Like they were meant to be not taken seriously, like the news every morning and stuff like that like people would watch.
The first night at midnight, they just played the first episode of Home Movies, which is a fantastic show, but then it kind of tapered off after that. And then a few months down the line, they also soft launched a couple other shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
I have seen this a little bit, and it's stupid. I could see how it would appeal to like edgy teenagers for sure.
Other popular Adult Swim cartoons, and they did this by airing it unannounced at 4 a.m. in December of 2001, so I don't know if they don't want people to see these things, but whatever. And then finally, after a 5-month delay, Adult Swim officially premiered on a Labor Day weekend, which is crazy, because people are doing shit on Labor Day weekend. No one is, whatever.
What a weird date, like, to make it big, you know?
Everything I just said, Adult Swim somehow managed to grow exponentially throughout its first year. And this is in spite of the fact that all the advertising promoting Adult Swim was not showing people why they should watch it. It was to prove to people that children shouldn't.
Oh, so it was kind of like, we're a red flag. Look at how much of a red flag we are. Especially since like the daytime programming was all about appealing to kids. Like imagine you're like, you know, trying to get more kids to watch your shows during the day, and then at night you just swap to like, you know,
is a wild way to handle this. But the explicit anti-advertising campaign actually really worked, and it kind of set the precedent for what the channel was going to be for the rest of its life. It nailed the coveted 18 to 34 age bracket, and that's my people, baby. That's what
Oh boy, it was right in here, baby. 40% of 18. See, I told you, the majority of these people are like, although I thought there was more of this, to be honest. I really thought like the edgy stuff, like South Park and some of the, you know, like the brain rot meme stuff with like a lot of swearing. I really thought there'd be more of this. But yeah, that's crazy. That's such a big chunk of people. Look at it.
I work for. Advertisers still had no goddamn clue what was going on with these oddball shows, but all they knew was they wanted a piece of it, baby, because people are watching it. And Adult Swim soon expanded to multiple nights with more original programming and more anime. They're always—
Oh wow, there we go. Let's see. King of the Hill, American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Bob's Burgers, Robot Chicken, Mike Tyson Mysteries. I've never heard of that one. Aqua Teen, Hunger Force, Squidbillies. Oh god. There they go.
to put more anime in this puppy, and it also became a haven for animated shows that were canceled by their original networks. Futurama and Family Guy both were canceled by Fox, and then they found a new life on Adult Swim, which
I thought what's really interesting is I don't remember if Family Guy did, but I watched some Futurama, and they would like have a pilot episode or like a commercial about their new season, and they would be like, they would definitely meme on the fact that they got dropped by one place and like glaze the other place that took them in. I was like, are they allowed to do that? I mean, W for them, right?
Gave it enough reputation and viewership to start those shows back over again. And if you take nothing out of this video, please understand that the only reason why Futurama continued to go was because of Adult Swim. So that's all you got to know about this channel and why it's so great. And the popularity of these X-Network shows brought a lot of people to the channel. And they were programmed earlier into the Adult Swim block, so like it was a buffer between children's cartoons and the weird shit that you're going to see later on.
Oh,
but actually, the crazy thing is the original programming that had all the crazy stuff in it, that became the main appeal of the channel, which
oh my gosh, Milk-chan, what the heck is that? Yeah, I don't know about any of these.
Nobody expected. You got Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which came from when the creator heard a story about how a fast food restaurant was putting together pieces of old burgers to sell to people like they were new.
Oh my gosh, really? That's how we got inspired for the series? First of all, that's disgusting that a place was even doing that. I didn't even know about that. I mean, it does not surprise me that they were doing that. But it's even weirder that that's what inspired this show to happen. Like, oh.
This show started. This show has an anthropomorphic milkshake, a box of fries, and a wad of meat, known as Meat Wad. They live in a suburban neighborhood, they fight aliens, and they live next to a perverted piece of shit named Carl. That's the premise of the show. It was a hit almost in spite of itself. It tried so hard to make people not like it. It was thought to be such an unwatchable show that network executives said that maybe let's make them detectives. Make them detectives. People will like that more. It makes a little bit more sense. And I guess, I mean, the show really had no plot to begin with, so if you give it a little something to go on, I guess they could make people watch it, but they were detectives for 3 episodes. And
they were detectives for 3 episodes to attempt being likable. That's so funny that they literally went for everything that people would not like. Like, they tried to get people to dislike it, and that's why people liked it.
Dropped that premise immediately and never went back to it. Where else are you gonna find this kind of stuff besides Adult Swim? The network begged for them to change the voice of Meatwad because no one can understand him when he talks. Literally, viewers were writing in saying, am I going crazy? I can't understand what this guy is saying, and they refused. The writers refused to do that. The creators also—
No, we like him to not be understandable by anyone.
Insisted that the voice of Master Shake, Dana Snyder, should get absolutely hammered for his audition tape to get the role, and he did, and he got the role.
I am a modern-day Tom Sawyer.
All of this combined made Aqua Teen Hunger Force the flagship show of the channel for years to come. We have the Venture Bros, which is a really important show if you look into it a little bit. It was a parody of the 60s style superhero family.
Yeah, I've never heard of this one. Have you guys heard of this one?
Shows like Johnny Quest, but after 7 seasons, it morphed into an entirely different thing altogether. Venture Bros was one of the first cartoon shows that adopted the golden age of television rules in terms of writing and plot. While other cartoon shows had short stories and very little continuity in terms of like, you know, like The Simpsons always wear the same shirt and everything goes back to normal at the end of the episode, Venture Bros created a cast of pop culture obsessed superheroes that like fought generational trauma that built upon itself. But the show would constantly take the audience expectations and turn them on their head, because like one episode they would maybe cover the topic of toxic masculinity and how much that can harm somebody, and then the next episode they'll bring in Brick Frog, who's a guy who dresses up like a frog and
I mean, I like this guy. I'm about Brick Frog. This guy looks pretty cool, okay? You have my attention.
bricks at people.
Brick Frog!
Thank you.
Part of the success of Venture Bros was the fact that it was only written by 2 people. There was no writer's room for this show. And that significantly slowed down the production of the show because it took 14 years to make 7 seasons. Which
Holy crap, that is insane.
Is a bad turnaround rate, but it created a mind meld of consistent, thoroughly thought out script writing that the creators called Unibrain. Instead of a writer's room where, you know, comedy writers are fighting over who gets their joke in there and it's not really about who, you know, the characters or the plot, Venture Bros became an honest expression of a very particular type of nerdy obsessive. The exact type of person who is up at 3 a.m. and watching cartoons. So
oh my gosh, they knew their target audience because they were the target audience.
out perfectly. But as much as Adult Swim nailed it with their adult cartoons, things got weirder over time. They switched the script a little bit by including live action programming to their adult cartoon block. The surreal satire of Tim and Eric's Awesome Show, Great Job and the Eric Andre Show brought a whole new brand of anti-comedy and cringe humor to people who have never seen that shit before. The editing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't seen these ones either. I was already asleep. I think it's interesting because it definitely is like the first, like, you know, brain rot culture stuff and like early like thoughtless memes things. But I also feel like for the time it was like considered anti-culture, you know? It was like the middle finger to all of those things that all the other TV programs like adhered to.
Style and surreal sense of humor of these shows created a home for offbeat performers to experiment and turned indie comics into influential voices in mainstream comedy. Without Adult Swim, someone like Eric Andre would still be pretending to be a caveman at Geico live events. And speaking of people that no one else is going to give a shot to, Adult Swim also did live action things that they like to call infomercials. They were not infomercials. These shows usually aired at 4 a.m. with no warning, no title card. They would just pretend to be commercials, or they wouldn't even pretend to be commercials. This is something I'm really passionate about. I love these things. Sometimes Adult Swim humor was the fact that there was no humor. Like,
they're literally doing something to not appeal to people. It's almost like rage bait, but it's like, it's not. Because the only person who's baited or upset about it is like other advertisers or other people abiding by the rules, right? It seems like it's meant to offend the not common audience, right?
Or about all the parts being not funny that made the whole bit hilarious. If you stumbled upon one of these infomercials at 4 a.m. and you had a little dribble of mental illness in your brain, you would wake up with grippy socks in a hospital the next morning. We have unedited footage of a bear, which starts out like, you know, an unedited footage of a bear, and then it breaks into an infomercial about anti-allergy medication and becomes a horrifying example of doppelgangers and I guess the big pharmaceutical industry. We have Too Many Cooks, which starts like a 90s comedy sitcom and then it devolves horribly. It's terrifying.
I've seen this. I haven't watched Too Many Cooks, but I know of it, okay?
We have There Are People in This House, which is my favorite thing I've ever seen in my entire life. If you have the time, jump into the ARG if There Are People in This House. It seems like it doesn't make sense. It makes a lot of sense and it's horrifying. Wham City Comedy made most of these, and Adult Swim is just doing stuff like this because they can, and it's still working. Like, imagine TBS doing something like this. Imagine MSNBC throwing on a horrifying bear video. They'd get shut down. Adult Swim doesn't care though, baby. What other channel are you gonna get stuff like this? You won't find it anywhere else. Adult Swim is in a league of its own.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Is nobody else was doing this. So it probably really caught people's attention, even if they didn't like it or were confused and didn't understand it. It still was getting attention because people are like, holy crap, I've never seen this, right? And a lot of this stuff would be offensive. Not all of it at a point. Sometimes it was just really random and stupid. But some of this stuff actually had a point, like the pharmaceutical industry being corrupt, that also wasn't being talked about because it was not profitable to do that. Like, they would not be able to monetize that content. So even if it was made, it was like a lot of people weren't even able to see it, right? This is why people watched it, even if they didn't like it. It was going to get a lot of viewership just because like people's minds were blown. Like, how does this even happen? How do they even exist, right?
Adult Swim didn't reinvent the wheel, but they did create something wholly unique. A mainstream place where animation for adults and subversive comedy could grow. It would be impossible to accurately measure the pop culture influence that Adult Swim has had on the American public, or the world, for that matter. And that's because it's bigger than the sum of its parts. You can draw parallels between Adult Swim's original programming and the biggest adult animated shows right now, like Bob's Burgers or BoJack Horseman. Or you can find parallels between the surrealist comedy of Tim Heidecker and Eric Andre into shows like I Think You Should Leave. That probably had a huge influence. There was countless writers, producers,
I don't know about that
came out of Adult Swim or came into Adult Swim, which changed the landscape forever. But altogether, Adult Swim was mostly just a vibe. It was just a vibe that...
Yeah. It just felt so different from everything else, you know?
Took America by storm. The brand exuded a feeling that anything could happen on this channel at any time. It had weird but fantastic self-referential bumpers, played insane April Fool's jokes on its viewers, and arguably brought anime into America's mainstream. I want to bring that up once again. I really think Adult Swim was a big part of that. It turned TV into an art form that commented on TV itself, which no one was doing back then. It's a place where a show like Robot Chicken that was rejected by Mad TV, Saturday Night Live, and Comedy Central could
Oh my god, I didn't realize it was rejected by all three of those. Holy crap.
Winning how many Emmys? Two Emmy Awards. And most importantly, to me, Adult Swim is a channel that's willing to take risks on creators who came from the internet, and no one else is able to do that. No other channel is doing that. I was raised on YouTube and Newgrounds, and watching people that I've been watching since I was a wee little tot get full shows on Adult Swim makes me want to cry. It makes me so happy.
You know what's crazy is that this way of thinking still has success in a whole other, like, it's like history repeats itself, right? Because we find that with video games now. That, like, a lot of the bigger, like, corpo entities that, like, spend hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars aren't as successful as a tiny team of people that, you know, are creative and do something monumental for their time. It's, like, the same, right? It's like the reason they succeeded at the end of the day was because they only had 2 dudes overworking. They had no overhead when they did this. They reflect the average person and what they want.
Started on the internet, the industry as a whole probably looks down upon you and doesn't think you're a real artist. Then Adult Swim said, let's take a shot on it, and now we have Rick and Morty, we have Smiling Friends, we have Haha You Clowns, we have Crystal Fantasy, literally all the shit Jack Stauber is doing. Like, it's really important to the culture what Adult Swim is doing. Streaming has completely disrupted the entertainment industry, but Adult Swim is something that could not be put into a simple box. Now entering its 3rd decade on television, Adult Swim is probably the most popular it ever has been, and I think I know why. Despite what everyone thinks in this industry, good art is good art. And even though it's not advertiser friendly, if you build it, they will come. And then when you have the people there, you can sell them a Trump coin at 3 a.m. or whatever the hell they run ads for on that channel. New videos every Saturday, maybe one on Wednesday. There's a lot in this video I wasn't able to touch on. Like, I really wanted to go into the bumpers, but like there's only so much I can say without just reading the bumpers. They're hilarious. You should look them up. Also, the art style, I don't know much about art styles, but the whole vibe of Adult Swim is fantastic. But regardless, maybe I'll talk about it later. Maybe someone else will talk about it for me. Thank you guys so much. Have a good weekend.
I don't know. This is so interesting to me. I love it. I love it. I love it. Because it's interesting back then they had like all of this commercialized television, and the second they like went anti-commercialism, you know, it popped off and was really successful, right? And then like now we're doing the same thing where like a lot of people are rebelling against like the over-hyper commercialized like video game industry. Like we're kind of doing the same thing. And indies are making these ideas that kind of rebel against like the norms of what most, at least corpos, would say makes a successful like game or makes things profitable, right? It feels kind of like the same thing, but in a whole different like era, right?